Okay, how's it going, everybody? So, we're going to read some more Mao Zedong today. This is on correcting mistaken ideas in the party. This was written December 1929. So, it's some very early Mao Zedong. In context of all his writings. It's in 1929. This is, it's not that short of a read. But it's just because it has multiple parts here that are short, like short sections of it. And they're also labeled in numbers. So this will be enjoyable to read, I think. The sections that follow are on the purely military viewpoint, on ultra democracy, on the disregard of organizational discipline, on absolute equalitarianism, on subjectivism, on individualism, on the ideology of roving rebel bands, on the remnants of Pushism. Okay, yeah, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. It has an introduction here, and it's got some notes at the bottom, and we can go ahead and get those at the end just for further context. It says, this article was a resolution drawn up by Comrade Mao Zedong for the Ninth Party Congress of the Fourth Army of the Red Army. The building of the Chinese People's Armed Forces was a difficult process. The Chinese Red Army, which became the Eighth Route and new Fourth Armies during the War of Resistance against Japan, and is now the People's Liberation Army, was created on August 1st, 1927, during the Nanchang Uprising, and by December 1929 had been in existence for over 2 years. During this period, the Communist Party organization in the Red Army learned a great deal and gained quite a rich store of experience in the course of combating various mistaken ideas. The resolution summed up this experience. It enabled the Red Army to build itself entirely on a Marxist-Leninist basis and to eliminate all the influences of armies of the old type. It was carried out not only in the Fourth Army, but also in all other units of the Red Army successfully. In this way, the whole Chinese Red Army became a genuine army of the people in every respect. In the last 30 years or so, the Chinese People's Armed Forces have made tremendous developments and innovations in their party activities and political work, which now present a very different picture. But the basic line remains the same as that laid down in this resolution. So yeah, that was an introduction it had here at the beginning. Let's go ahead and get into it. And then Mao has an introduction before beginning. It says, there are various non-proletarian ideas in the Communist Party organization in the Fourth Red Army, which greatly hinder the application of the party's correct line. Unless these ideas are thoroughly corrected, the Fourth Army cannot possibly shoulder the task assigned to it in China's great revolutionary struggle. The source of such incorrect ideas in this party organization lies, of course, in the fact that its basic units are composed largely of peasants and other elements of petty bourgeois origin. Yet the failure of the party's leading bodies to wage a concerted and determined struggle against these incorrect ideas and to educate the members in the party's correct line is also an important cause of their existence and growth. In accordance with the spirit of the September letter of the Central Committee, this Congress hereby points out the manifestations of various non-proletarian ideas in the party organization in the Fourth Army, their sources, and the methods of correcting them, and calls upon all comrades to eliminate them thoroughly. So this is the first section on the purely military viewpoint. The purely military viewpoint is very highly developed among a number of comrades in the Red Army. It manifests itself as follows. 1. These comrades regard military affairs and politics as opposed to each other and refuse to recognize that military affairs are only one means of accomplishing political tasks. Some even say, quote, if you are good militarily, naturally you are good politically. If you are not good militarily, you cannot be any good politically, end quote. This is to go a step further and give military affairs a leading position over politics. Number 2. They think that the task of the Red Army, like that of the White Army, is merely to fight. They do not understand that the Chinese Red Army is an armed body for carrying out the political task of the revolution. Especially at present, the Red Army should certainly not confine itself to fighting, besides fighting to destroy the enemy's military strength. It should shoulder such important tasks as doing propaganda among the masses, organizing the masses, arming them, helping them to establish revolutionary political power, and setting up party organizations. The Red Army fights not merely for the sake of fighting, but in order to conduct propaganda among the masses, organize them, arm them, and help them to establish the revolutionary political power. Without these objectives, fighting loses its meaning and the Red Army loses the reason for its existence. Number 3. Hence, organizationally, these comrades subordinate the departments of the Red Army doing political work to those doing military work, and put forward the slogan, quote, "Let Army headquarters handle outside matters," end quote. If allowed to develop, this idea would involve the danger of estrangement from the masses, control of the government by the army, and departure from proletarian leadership. It would be to take the path of warlordism, like the Kuomintang army. 4. At the same time, in propaganda work, they overlook the importance of propaganda teams. On the question of mass organization, they neglect the organizing of soldiers, committees, in the army, and the organizing of the local workers and peasants. As a result, both propaganda and organizational work are abandoned. 5. They become conceited when a battle is won and dispirited when a battle is lost. 6. Departmentalism. They think only of the Fourth Army and do not realize that it is an important task of the Red Army to arm the local masses. This is cliquism in a magnified form. 7. Unable to see beyond their limited environment in the Fourth Army. A few comrades believe that no other revolutionary forces exist. Hence, their extreme addiction to the idea of conserving strength and avoiding action. This is a remnant of opportunism. 8. Some comrades, disregarding the subjective and objective conditions, suffer from the malady of revolutionary impetuosity. They will not take pains to do minute and detailed work among the masses, but riddled with delusions, want only to do big things. This is a remnant of Pushism. It says, so we're going to start numbers over. It says, the sources of the purely military viewpoint are: 1. A low political level. From this flows the failure to recognize the role of political leadership in the army, and to recognize that the Red Army and the White Army are fundamentally different. 2. The mentality of mercenaries. Many prisoners captured in past battles have joined the Red Army, and such elements bring with them a markedly mercenary outlook, thereby providing a basis in the lower ranks for the purely military viewpoint. 3. From the two preceding causes, there arises a third: overconfidence in military strength and absence of confidence in the strength of the masses of the people. 4. The party's failure actively to attend to and discuss military work is also a reason for the emergence of the purely military viewpoint among a number of comrades. And then another section here, it starts the numbers over. It says, the methods of correction are as follows. 1. Raise the political level in the party by means of education. Destroy the theoretical roots of the purely military viewpoint, and be dear on the fundamental difference between the Red Army and the White Army. At the same time, eliminate the remnants of opportunism and Pushism, and break down the selfish departmentalism of the Fourth Army. 2. Intensify the political training of officers and men, and especially the education of ex-prisoners. At the same time, as far as possible, let the local government select workers and peasants experienced in struggle to join the Red Army, thus organizationally weakening or even eradicating the purely military viewpoint. 3. Arouse the local party organizations to criticize the party organizations in the Red Army and the organs of mass political power to criticize the Red Army itself, in order to influence the party organizations and the officers and men of the Red Army. 4. The party must actively attend to and discuss military work. All the work must be discussed and decided upon by the party before being carried out by rank and file. 5. Draw up Red Army rules and regulations, which dearly define its task, the relationship between its military and political apparatus, the relationship between the Red Army and the masses of the people, and the powers and functions of the soldiers' committees and their relationship with the military and political organizations. Okay, yeah, so then it's as on ultra democracy here. This is the next one, on ultra democracy. says here. Since the Fourth Army of the Red Army accepted the directives of the Central Committee, there has been a great decrease in the manifestations of ultra-democracy. For example, party decisions are now carried out fairly well, and no longer does anyone bring up such erroneous demands as that the Red Army should apply, quote, democratic centralism from the bottom to the top, end quote, or should, quote, let the lower levels discuss all problems first and then let the higher levels decide, end quote. Actually, however, this decrease is only temporary and superficial and does not mean that ultra-democratic ideas have already been eliminated. In other words, ultra-democracy is still deep-rooted in the minds of many comrades. Witness the various expressions of reluctance to carry out party decisions. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. In the sphere of theory, destroy the roots of ultra-democracy. First, it should be pointed out that the danger of ultra-democracy lies in the fact that it damages or even completely wrecks the party organization and weakens or even completely undermines the party's fighting capacity, when rendering the party incapable of fulfilling its fighting task and thereby causing the defeat of the revolution. Next, it should be pointed out that the source of ultra-democracy consists in the petty bourgeoisie's individualistic aversion to discipline. When this characteristic is brought into the party, it develops into ultra-democratic ideas, politically and organizationally. These ideas are utterly incompatible with the fighting task of the proletariat. 2. In the sphere of organization, ensure democracy under centralized guidance. It should be done on the following lines. 1. The leading bodies of the party must give a correct line of guidance and correct solutions when problems arise, in order to establish themselves as centers of leadership. 2. The higher bodies must be familiar with the life of the masses. The first one was 2.1, this is 2.2. The higher bodies must be familiar with the life of the masses and with the situation in the lower bodies so as to have an objective basis for correct guidance. 2.3. No party organization at any level should make casual decisions in solving problems. Once a decision is reached, it must be firmly carried out. 2.4. All decisions of any importance made by the party's higher bodies must be promptly transmitted to the lower bodies in the party rank and file. The method is to call meetings of activists or general membership meetings of the party branches or even of the columns, when circumstances permit, and to assign people to make reports at such meetings. 2.5. The lower bodies of the party and the party rank and file must discuss the higher bodies' directives in detail in order to understand their meaning thoroughly and decide on the methods of carrying them out. So then we have here, this is the next section, on the disregard of organizational discipline. Disregard of organizational discipline in the party organization in the Fourth Army manifests itself as follows. A. Failure of the minority to submit to the majority. For example, when a minority finds its motion voted down, it does not sincerely carry out the party's decisions. The methods of correction are as follows. A1. It says 1. At meetings, all participants should be encouraged to voice their opinions as fully as possible. The rights and wrongs of any controversy should be clarified without compromise or glossing over, in order to reach a clear-cut conclusion, which cannot be settled at one meeting, should be discussed at another, provided there is no interference with the work. This is A.2. One requirement of the party discipline is that the minority should submit to the majority. If the view of the minority has been rejected, it must support the decision passed by the majority. If necessary, it could bring up the maker for reconsideration at the next meeting. But apart from that, it must not act against the decision in any way. And it says here B. Criticism made without regard to organizational discipline. It says B1. Inter-party criticism is a weapon for strengthening the party organization and increasing its fighting capacity. In the party organization of the Red Army, however, criticism is not always of this character, and sometimes turns into a personal attack. As a result, it damages the party organization as well as individuals. This is a manifestation of petty bourgeois individualism. The method of correction is to help party members understand that the purpose of criticism is to increase the party's fighting capacity in order to achieve victory in the class struggle, and that it should not be used as means of personal attack. B2. Many party members make their criticisms not inside but outside the party. The reason is that the general membership has not yet grasped the importance of the party organization, its meetings and so forth, and sees no difference between criticism inside and outside the organization. The method of correction is to educate party members so that they understand the importance of party organization and make their criticisms of party committees or comrades at party meetings. Okay, so this is the next section is on absolute equalitarianism. Absolute equalitarianism became quite serious in the Red Army at one time. Here are some examples. On the matter of allowances to wounded soldiers, there were objections to differentiating between light and serious cases, and the demand was raised for equal allowances for all. When officers rode on horseback, it was regarded not as something necessary for performing their duties, but as a sign of inequality. Absolutely equal distribution of supplies was demanded, and there was objection to somewhat larger allotments in special cases. In the hauling of rice, the demand was made that all should carry the same load on their backs, irrespective of age or physical condition. Equality was demand in the allotment of billets, and the headquarters would be abused for occupying larger rooms. Equality was demanded in the assignment of fatigue duties, and there was unwillingness to do a little more than the next man. It even went so far that, when there were 2 wounded men, but only 1 stretcher, neither could be carried away because each refused to yield priority to the other. Absolute equalitarianism, as shown in these examples, is still very serious among officers and soldiers of the Red Army. Absolute equalitarianism, like ultra-democracy in political matters, is the product of a handicraft and small peasant economy, the only difference being that the one manifests itself in material affairs, while the other manifests itself in political affairs. The method of correction. We should point out that, before the abolition of capitalism, absolute equalitarianism is a mere illusion of peasants and small proprietors, and that even under socialism, there can be no absolute equality for material things there can be no absolute equality, for material things will then be distributed on the principle of, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his work, end quote, as well as on that of meeting the needs of the work. The distribution of material things in the Red Army must be more or less equal, as in the case of equal pay for officers and men, because this is required by present circumstances of the struggle. But absolute equalitarianism, beyond reason, must be opposed, because it is not required by the struggle. On the contrary, it hinders the struggle. So this next section is on subjectivism. Subjectivism exists to a serious degree among some party members, causing great harm to the analysts of the political situation and the guidance of the work. The reason is that subjective analysts of a political situation and subjective guidance of work inevitably result either in opportunism or in pushism. As for subjective criticism, loose and groundless talk or suspiciousness, such practices inside the party often breed unprincipled disputes and undermine the party organization. I'm sorry. Another point that should be mentioned in connection with inter-party criticism is that some comrades ignore the major issues and confine their attention to minor points when they make their criticism. They do not understand that the main task of criticism is to point out political and organizational mistakes. As to personal shortcomings, unless they are related to political and organizational mistakes, there is no need to be overcritical and to embarrass the comrades concerned. Moreover, once such criticism develops, there is the great danger that the party members will concentrate entirely on minor faults, and everyone will become timid and overcautious and forget the party's political task. The main method of correction is to educate party members so that a political and scientific spirit pervades their thinking and their party life. To this end, we must 1. Teach party members to apply the Marxist-Leninist method in analyzing a political situation and appraising the class forces, instead of making a subjective analysis and appraisal. 2. Direct the attention of party members to social and economic investigation and study, so as to determine the tactics of struggle and methods of work, and help comrades to understand that without investigation of actual conditions, they will fall into the pit of fantasy and pushism. And 3. In inter-party criticism, guard against subjectivism, arbitrariness, and the vulgarization of criticism. Statements should be based on facts, and criticism should center on politics. This next section is on individualism. The tendency towards individualism in the Red Army Party organization manifests itself as follows. 1. Retaliation. Some comrades, after being criticized inside the party by a soldier comrade, look for opportunities to retaliate outside the party, and one way is to beat or abuse the comrade in question. They also seek to retaliate within the party. Quote, "You have criticized me at this meeting, so I'll find some way to pay you back at the next." End quote. Such retaliation arises from purely personal considerations, to the neglect of the interests of the class and of the party as a whole. Its target is not the enemy class, but individuals in our own ranks. It is a corrosive which weakens the organization and its fighting capacity. 2. Small group mentality. Some comrades consider only the interests of their own small group and ignore the general interests. Although on the surface this does not seem to be the pursuit of personal interests, in reality it exemplifies the narrowest individualism, and has a strong corrosive and centrifugal effect. Quote, "Small group," end quote, mentality used to be rife in the Red Army, and although there has been some improvement as a result of criticism, there are still survivals and further effort is needed to overcome it. 3. The, quote, "employee," end quote, mentality. Some comrades do not understand that the party and the Red Army, of which they are members, are both instruments for carrying out the task of the revolution. They do not realize that they themselves are makers of the revolution, but think that their responsibility is merely to their individual superiors and not to the revolution. This passive mentality of an, quote, "employee," end quote, of the revolution is also a manifestation of individualism. It explains why there are not many activists who work unconditionally for the revolution. Unless it is eliminated, the number of activists will not grow, and the heavy burden of the revolution will remain on the shoulders of a small number of people, much to the detriment of the struggle. 4. Pleasure seeking. In the Red Army, there are also quite a few people whose individualism finds expression in pleasure seeking. They always hope that their unit will march into big cities. They want to go there not to work, but to enjoy themselves. The last thing they want is to work in the red areas, where life is hard. 5. Passivity. Some comrades become passive and stop working whenever anything goes against their wishes. This is mainly due to lack of education, though sometimes it is also due to the leadership's improper conduct of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline. 6. The desire to leave the Red Army. The number of people who ask for transfers from the Red Army to local work is on the increase. The reason for this does not lie entirely with the individuals, but also with 1. The material hardships of life in the Red Army. 2. Exhaustion after long struggle. 3. The leadership's improper conduct of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline. The method of correction is primarily to strengthen education so as to rectify individualism ideologically. Next, it is to conduct affairs, make assignments, and enforce discipline in a proper way. In addition, ways must be found to improve the material life of the Red Army, and every available opportunity must be utilized for rest and rehabilitation in order to improve material conditions. In our educational work, we must explain that in its social origin, individualism is a reflection within the party of petty bourgeois and bourgeois ideas. So this next section is on the ideology of roving rebel bands. It says here, the political ideology of roving rebel bands has emerged in the Red Army because the proportion of vagabond elements is large and because there are great masses of vagabonds in China, especially in the southern provinces. This ideology manifests itself as follows. 1. Some people want to increase our political influence only by means of rolling guerrilla actions, but are unwilling to increase it by undertaking the arduous task of building up base areas and establishing the people's political power. 2. In expanding the Red Army, some people follow the line of, quote, hiring men and buying horses, end quote, and, quote, recruiting deserters and accepting mutineers, end quote, rather than the line of expanding the local Red Guards and the local troops, and thus developing the main forces of the Red Army. 3. Some people lack the patience to carry out an arduous struggles together with the masses, and only want to go to the big cities to eat and drink to their heart's content. All these manifestations of the ideology of roving rebels seriously hamper the Red Army in performing its proper task. Consequently, its eradication is an important objective in the ideological struggle within the Red Army Party organization. It must be understood that the ways of roving rebels of the Huang Chao or Li Chuang type are not permissible under present-day conditions. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. Intensify education, criticize incorrect ideas, and eradicate the ideology of roving rebel bands. 2. Intensify education among the basic sections of the Red Army and among recently recruited captives to counter the vagabond outlook. 3. Draw active workers and peasants experienced in struggle into the ranks of the Red Army so as to change its composition. 4. Create new units of the Red Army from among the masses of militant workers and peasants. Okay, and then this next section, it's the last section, is on the remnants of Putschism. The party organization in the Red Army has already waged struggles against Putschism, but not yet to a sufficient extent. Therefore, remnants of this ideology still exist in the Red Army. Their manifestations are 1. Blind action regardless of subjective and objective conditions. 2. Inadequate and irresolute application of the party's policies for the cities. 3. Slack military discipline, especially in moments of defeat. 4. Acts of house burning by some units. 5. The practices of shooting deserters, and of inflicting corporal punishment, both of which smack of Putschism. In its social origin, Putschism is a combination of lumpen proletarian and petty bourgeois ideology. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. Eradicate Putschism ideologically. 2. Correct Putschist behavior through rules, regulations, and policies. Okay, yeah. So that is on correcting mistaken ideas in the party, written by Mao Zedong, December 1929. So yeah, it was an article that he drew up for the 9th Party Congress of the 4th Army of the Red Army. So there's some notes here. There's a at the very end here, maybe we can get some more context about stuff that we just heard about. There's 5 of them. Let's go ahead and just read these real quick. For a brief period after the defeat of the revolution in 1927, a quote-unquote left Putschist tendency arose in the Communist Party, regarding the Chinese Revolution as a quote permanent revolution, end quote, and the revolutionary situation in China as a quote permanent upsurge, end quote. The Putschist comrades refused to organize an orderly retreat, and, adopting the methods of commandism and relying only on a small number of party members and a small section of the masses, erroneously attempted to stage a series of local uprisings throughout the country, which had no prospect of success. Such Putschist activities were widespread at the end of 1927, but gradually subsided in the beginning of 1928, though sentiments in favor of Putschism still survived among some comrades. 2. In the guerrilla system of organization, a column corresponded to a division in the regular army with a complement much more flexible and usually much smaller than that of regular division. 3. These 2 Chinese idioms refer to the methods which some rebels in Chinese history adopted to expand their forces. In the application of these methods, attention was paid to numbers rather than to quality, and people of all sorts were indiscriminately recruited to swell the ranks. 4. Huang Chao was the leader of the peasant revolts towards the end of the Tung dynasty in AD 875, starting from his home district at Shaoqiao, now Hotse County in Shantung. Huang led armed peasants in victorious battles against the imperial forces that styled himself the, quote, heaven-storming general, end quote. In the course of a decade, he swept over most of the provinces in the Yellow, Yangtze, Huai, and Pearl River valleys, reaching as far as Guangxi. He finally broke through the Tungquang Pass, captured the imperial capital of Chang'an, now Xi'an and Shenxi, and was crowned emperor of Qi. Internal dissensions and attacks by the non-Han tribal allies of the Tang forces compelled Huang to abandon Chang'an and retreat to his native district, where he committed suicide. The 10 Years' War fought by him is one of the most famous peasant wars in Chinese history. Dynastic historians record that, quote, all people suffering from heavy taxes and levies rallied to him, end quote. But as he merely carried on roving warfare without ever establishing relatively consolidated base areas, his forces were called, quote, roving rebel bands, end quote. It says number 5 here. Li Chuang, short for Li Su Cheng, the King Chuang, the Darol king, native of Michi, northern Shenzi, was the leader of a peasant revolt which led to the overthrow of the Ming dynasty. The revolt first started in northern Shenzi in 1628. Li joined the forces led by Cao Ying Xiang and campaigned through Honan and Anhui and back to Shenzi. After Cao's death in 1636, Li succeeded him, becoming King Chuang, and campaigned in and out of the provinces of Shenzi, Sichuan, Honan, and Hubei. Finally, he captured the imperial capital of Peking in 1644, whereupon the last Ming emperor committed suicide. The chief slogan he spread among the masses was, "Support King Chuang and pay no grain taxes," end quote. Another slogan of his to enforce discipline among his men ran, quote, "Any murder means the killing of my father. Any rape means the violation of my mother," end quote. Thus, he won the support of the masses, and his movement became the main current of the peasant revolts raging all over the country. As he too roamed about without ever establishing relatively consolidated base areas, he was eventually defeated by Wu San Kui, a Ming general who colluded with the Qing troops in a joint attack on Li. So those are just some extra notes for context of some of the stuff Mao was talking about. But this is Mao Zedong on correcting mistaken ideas in the party, written December 1929. So thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. Not TikTok. I haven't been on TikTok. I think Oracle bought TikTok, so they turned it into something that's really imperialist and censors everything, but censors people for NATO. But follow me Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Hit me up there. Y'all have a great day, and Dodada Goi.